want to acknowledge our other colleague, Michelle Dineman, who has done a lot of work with us on ageism. And I'd like to say hi to Ernest Gonzalez, who's my colleague at NYU, who works a lot with me on productive engagement. And that's why I got into this topic of ageism. I study the productive engagement of older adults, how older adults are doing paid and non-paid work, working, volunteering, caregiving, important roles for society, important roles for older adults. And we've always argued that we needed to focus on programs and policies to optimize productive engagement. But I have come to learn that attitudes about older adults and ageism has profound effects in this field. We could have great employment policies, but if employers or supervisors devalue, discriminate against older workers, negative outcomes still exist. So my work in productive engagement has led me to ageism. Concurrently, my colleagues at the Center for Aging have been developing our Wash U for Life initiative to advance age diversity and age inclusivity in higher education. And again, transformations in higher education are thwarted by ageism. So we have been learning about ageism. We've been reading and studying. We're students of ageism, hoping that we move our efforts more towards squarely confronting ageism and expanding our research on productive engagement to include ageism. So today we're going to share things we're learning and give a good overview of things we can do to understand ageism, its negative effects, and what we might do about it. So we start with the definition of ageism. I like the World Health Organization that ageism pertains to stereotypes, how we act, stereotypes, how we feel, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act towards others based on their age. So we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have actions in this definition. We know that ageism develops over life, just like the other ageisms. We're exposed to it early in books, media, people around us, but it's different from other ageisms because it's discrimination against our future selves. If we live long enough, we will encounter ageism. As this says, ageism will catch up to you. There's some unique features of age as an identity issue that makes it a little different than all of the other ageisms that plague our society. It's changing all the time for us. Natalie, next slide, if you can. There we go. Age is changing continually for our own identities. Everyone's doing it. And it's also stratified by law. So by law, you can discriminate or privilege people according to age, who can vote, who can drive, who can get Medicare. And additionally, and as strongly on the next slide, you see that it is stratified very deeply in the way we think about the life course. We have certain ages that we think people should do certain things. When should you go to college? When should you date? When should you retire? These are very strong and create stereotypes and biases against older people. We're going to show you a video produced by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is very committed to a campaign combating ageism. And people all over the world here are saying how it feels when people see only their age. There's a lot of accents. The sound's not great, but you'll get the gist.
So what's this all about?
I'm too old for this.
You just want me to say what people say about me.
Weird question, I guess.
My teacher says you'll grow out of it. It's just a phase.
It was never a phase. I never grew out of it.
I guess I'm too reckless, I don't know.
People like to talk very loudly to me.
They say I don't think things through.
You're looking still good for your age.
I'll figure it out when I'm older.
You are having a senior moment.
When the focus is on my age,
Life seems to get a little bit harder.
It feels like I'm not given a chance.
I need to keep up.
Or get out of the way.
I lack experience.
or too much experience?
I'm baggage.
Only weighing people down.
Looking at my age,
Like it is a disease.
where I work, no one takes me seriously.
It makes me feel powerless.
And it hurts.
When people see only my age.
So we hear at the end of that video that it hurts when we only see someone's age, and that age doesn't define us. Yet we do make assumptions about others based on their age. When we think of an older person, what stereotypes do most of us hold? These stereotypes on the slide show that the narrative about aging generally very negative, the connotations about age that we have in our minds. When we think about young people, we also have stereotypes. Normally, we think about older adults when we think about ageism, but we want to remember that ageism can apply to people of all ages, and we certainly have stereotypes that can be very limiting and hurtful for millennials, Gen Z, etc. There's lots of types of ageism that have been identified. I want to give you the main ways that people think about types of ageism. Explicit, ideas, attitudes, practice, perform while knowing you're being biased against a person based on their age. It's in our awareness, intentionally advertising in a way that excludes older people. Financial scams targeting older people. Implicit ageism, on the other hand, is outside of our awareness, performed without knowing that they are biased, making jokes, having fun around someone's age, not choosing an older person to be on a work team. External ageism is perpetuated as other directed, perpetuated by others towards an older person. Internalized ageism is perpetuated towards the self. So self-stereotyping. We also talk about compassionate ageism, the belief that older adults are needy and deserve special attention. This has the potential to reinforce paternalistic, patronizing, disempowering beliefs and actions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later because in the case of COVID, there were suggestions to quarantine only older people, a very protective stance, but one that's also very discriminatory. And finally, and very powerfully, institutional and structural ageism, where ageism is built into our organizations in our life via programs and policies. Prevalence of ageism, we've documented in a lot of surveys just how much people experience other directed ageism and internalized ageism. This is a study from the University of Michigan, National Poll on Healthy Aging, over 2,000 randomly selected people between the age of 50 and 80, 2019 study, where you can see that 82% of people in that age range reported experiencing everyday ageism. They sort their types of ageism into 3 different types. The first one is exposure to ageist messages, ageism in interpersonal interactions with other people, and then internalized ageism. Let's look a little more closely at their data around these 3 types of ageism. So exposure to ageist message, how often people hear, see, or read jokes about older people and aging, how often people see, hear, and hear that older adults are unattractive or undesirable. So that's exposure. The next questions had to do with internalized, how much an older person believes that late life means being lonely, that late life means being depressed. Most of the questions are interpersonal ageism. So people reporting that they experience other people assuming that they can't use a cell phone or a computer, that they can't hear or see, that they can't remember. So these are the type of questions people ask to capture ageism and to reflect on its prevalence in our society. And when these data are analyzed, the people who report experience experiencing more ageism are older, are women, are lower socioeconomic status, are rural, and are retired people. So we even see variation in later life around who reports more ageism. Birthday cards we love to buy for each other and laugh about. But Natalie, and you can flip through these slowly. We all know them, so I don't think I need to read them. But this one is true. Swimming is dangerous at our age. Lifeguards don't pay as much attention. We know that that translates into other realms where it does make a big difference, like in healthcare. So you can look at these slides while I ask you to think, would we do this about any other subpopulation in this country? Would we have slides about women or persons of color where we would make discounting cards and laugh about it with each other? So we suggest that ageism is one of the, is so much more accepted in this country than other types of isms. Yeah, and I love this card where even you're 50, you can't remember at age 50, you know, which is sort of half the lifespan of some of the students that are coming to WashU right now. Okay, where does ageism occur? Why does ageism occur? There's theories about why we, for so long, developed these anti-ageist feelings. The idea is we want to separate ourselves from functional decline, from end of life, from death. So we need to separate older people. We need to avoid all things old and dying. You know, we venerate youth, vigor, and beauty and productivity. It's otherizing. We otherize older people to protect ourselves from the fear of dying. There's the next slide. There's a systematic review that I recommend to you, a 2020 review. 199 studies were examined to identify factors associated with ageism. These largely were factors of who expressed other-directed ageism. And you can see there's multi-levels. It confirms the theory in that the most prominent determinants of personal ageism are an individual's own anxiety about aging, their own fear of death. But at the interpersonal and intergroup level, the amount of contact with older people is an important determinant about how ageist we are. And the studies generally find that it's the quality of contact, not necessarily the quantity of contact. And those who have more positive images of older people in their lives are less ageist. At the highest level, people have documented that the number of resources in an organization or society decreases and the number of older people increases, this can lead to ageism. There's like a tension over resource allocation. It's that old zero-sum perspective where if old people have it, other people don't. And that can be a root of ageism. So I highly recommend this article. They help us understand why ageism exists. Next, we're going to go through some points about where we see ageism. Another slide from the World Health Organization. I wanted to put this one up because this last point on intersectionality, ageism exacerbates other disadvantages. Intersectionality theories posit that the health effects of multiple marginalizing characteristics converge. And we know that to be true in our research. If we take two matched resumes, two CVs of somebody that's exactly alike, we only alter their age and we alter their race and we put it in front of potential employers. We know that the employers are going to be sorting out older people, sorting out people of color, but older people of color are sorted out the most. So that's just a good example of intersectionality. We also saw intersectionality big time during COVID when folks that were at the most risk for death and lack of treatment and access were older Black people in this country. So speaking of COVID, it definitely exposed intersectionality, but it also just exposed ageism more generally. we saw a lot of press that suggested that there wasn't as much attention paid in the beginning to the pandemic because only older people were being affected. We knew that age guidelines for triaging treatment were suggested. And we also know that older adults were targeted for lockdown, for separation. And again, this is that example of compassionate ageism. Older adults being thought of as warm and deserving, but also incompetent. And this leads to paternalism and treating older adults as if they are children. So this really fuels other directed ageism as well as internalized ageism. So the pandemic really strengthened our willingness to homogenize older adults into one big monolithic group. Higher risk of COVID, we know that, but also dependent, frail, lonely. And all older adults were thought of in that big bucket. We failed to see people, older people, as essential workers. Older people were healthcare providers, Dr. Fauci, frontline workers, volunteers, caregivers. So the solution is not to single people out by age and see them as dispensable, but to consider everybody at their uniqueness. Okay, let's turn, let me see how I'm doing on time. I'm doing okay. We're going to turn to places where we have documented the existence of ageism and how. The workplace. It's really important that we start to think about ageism in the workplace because right now, over a third of our workforce are over the age of 50. 61% of adults over the age of 45 say they've seen and experienced age discrimination in the workplace. We have documented that discrimination occurs at all stages of the employment cycle. Employers are significantly less likely to hire older applicants, less likely to offer training and advancement opportunities. And we know that people who experience ageism in the workplace are more likely to retire. In regards to COVID, we know that people, older workers left the workplace, were furloughed and left more than younger workers out of concerns for the virus. But now they're having a harder time getting back in. We know from historical employment cycles that older workers take about twice as long as younger workers to re-enter the job market. So the effects of COVID in the workplace, the effects of ageism in the workplace are very profound, but we have to remember that younger people report it too. In surveys, younger people report that they are stereotyped by coworkers because they don't believe they have the maturity or the experience. Okay, next sector we look at is in the healthcare sector. A systematic review in the literature found that older age was associated with higher rates of decisions to withhold ventilator support, to withhold surgery, to not prescribe dialysis, even after controlling for patients' prognosis and care preferences. So age retains some predictive power on who got what treatments. We also know that ageism is related to fewer people coming into geriatrics. Less than 3% of medical students choose geriatric electives. 4% of social workers specialize in working with older adults. There's a statistic that 60% of psychologists see older people as clients, although only 3% treat them as a specialty. So people are reluctant to come in to serving older people related to our feelings of about stereotyping older adults. In the media, I'll go on to the next one, Natalie. We know about the messages that we get in the media. 46% of the US population are over the age of 50, but only 15% of people pictured in ads are over 50. So disproportionately represented. We'd rather see younger people in our ads. And when older people are there, they're often misportrayed, not engaged in the workforce, not digitally engaged, not being active, but being more stereotyped. And of course, we know that There's lots of ads that are still pushing anti-aging, stop aging products. Higher education is a sector that we're particularly interested in and doing some work in right now. Higher education is so historically age segregated. In the US, we've always thought our education is set up, we start in childhood, we're done in young adulthood, and we don't worry much about ongoing educational opportunities for people midlife and beyond, for career advancement, for professional development, for switching careers, for enrichment. We know how young our college campuses are and how uncomfortable older adults can feel in classes and in certificate programs, et cetera. There's even some institutional policies that discriminate. For example, there is Age Discrimination in Education Act, but institutions can get around that by saying that they want an applicant who is within 2 years or give a grant to somebody who's within 2 years, of receiving a degree, which eliminates people who graduated quite a bit earlier than that. So let's switch now to the outcomes of ageism. We've documented it occurs in all these sectors. What is the effects of it? And there is research in this area and quite a bit of it. Everything on this slide has some studies behind it. Most of the studies focus on individual health. If you read that list of outcomes, all of those things have been documented to be associated with people who have internalized ageism or experienced it because of the age bias of a provider. Beyond health, we know that it reduces income and retirement security because of the discrimination in the workplace. We know that it can lead to dissatisfaction and discouragement in people leaving the workforce before they might want to. Intergenerational conflicts, if there's this zero sum, if you get it, I don't get it attitude. And we know that our fear of age and ageism inhibits research and training, as we talked about on age and ageism itself. I'm going to show you one. How do we know this stuff? There's a lot of experiments that I could tell you about, and I'd be glad to share that. We are producing a background paper that will be available very soon that reviews a lot of this literature. But most commonly, we're stuck with longitudinal designs where we try to track the effects of something on outcome, right? So this was a classic study. I wanted to show you this one because these researchers are very big in this field of the effects of ageism. A 10-year-old study using the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, 38 years of data, about 400 people that they tracked over time, showing that those who held more negative beliefs about aging at baseline experienced more cognitive decline over time. So we have, in all sorts of health outcomes, we have this kind of pattern that we see. Of course, this is limited. It's not an experiment. We also have some experiments where we manipulate messages about age, internal and external, and document its effects on people. And that work, next slide, Natalie, is really informed by a theory. And Becca Levy, who, his name's not on this slide, it's in our reference list, has done the most work on internalized ageism and its effect on our health. And she has proposed this theory that talks about how does ageism affect our health? And it's through age discrimination, age stereotype, and negative perceptions of age. She has this idea that age stereotypes are internalized from the host culture at a young age. At some point, these stereotypes become self-stereotypes, we believe them, and then they consciously or unconsciously affect our health via many pathways, including decreased self-efficacy, decreased sense of control, worse health behaviors, and straight up stress response of the autonomic nervous system. So this is a theory that's being tested about how come ageism can express ourselves in health outcomes. There's a terrific review, systematic review on the next slide that I'd also refer you to if you'd like to know more about, I got to stop pretty quick here, to know more about the impact of the research on the impacts of ageism on health. This study reviewed 422 articles from across the globe that had some assessment of ageism, some assessment of health very broadly, and included articles that looked at the association between ageism and health. In 75% of these associations, there was the higher the ageism or the existence of ageism, the worse the health outcomes. But they categorized all these studies to see where we're studying the most about health outcomes. So this is really number of studies, but I wanted you to see all of the outcomes that are being, or all of the associative factors with ageism. Denied access to services, lack of work opportunities, mental health, physical health, exclusion from research, quality of life, risky behaviors, etc. So we have studies in all of those that document the negative association between ageism and health outcomes. So we'll have all of this available to you. We hope you'll take a look at it. But now we're going to turn to Natalie and look at some of the things that are happening around the country to try to confront ageism. Thanks, Natalie.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Yeah, so as Nancy mentioned, I'm going to go over some of the different ways to combat ageism now. This again is another slide from the toolkit, the information that the World Health Organization has recently put out on their global campaign to combat ageism. And we know that improving people's understanding of ageism, such as we're hoping to do today, is a prerequisite for reducing ageism and for changing the narrative around age and aging. And there are a number of ways to do that. A few of them we're going to go over in more detail, following in line with what's on this slide. So first is policy and law, programs and policies. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Federal Age Discrimination and Employment Act, which prohibits age-based discrimination against workers through hiring, firing, layoffs, compensation, and other conditions of employment. And this law covers all workers age 40 and older, particularly in firms, larger firms, 20 and more. But the big question here is whether the ADEA and similar state laws have really helped or hurt older workers. Older workers might be more hesitant then to bring lawsuits forward. They might have been also prevented companies from unfairly dismissing older workers. And so how would the law benefit insiders who already have jobs, but also harm outsiders seeking employment, which is another thing to think about with these laws. And also in regards to working, age discrimination could be more strongly addressed if Protecting Older Americans Against Discrimination Act, at the bottom of the slide here, of 2021, HR 2062, is passed. This legislation would reinstate the original intent of the Age Discrimination and Employment Act and say that age can be a factor, not the only or the primary factor in an age discrimination claim. And then also there is another proposed Fair Employment Protection Act of 2014, which aims to protect individuals of all ages, races, genders, and sexual identities and disabilities from hostility in work environments. And along with that, there are several laws at the state level too, which we can see here. For instance, there is a law in Connecticut that makes it illegal for employers to require information on an initial job application that would reveal applicants' age. So these would be things such as birth dates, including dates that you graduated from college, or the years of past jobs and the length of time that you've spent on past jobs as well. And in New Jersey, there's another law, the Amendment to Law Against Discrimination, that deletes the provision that had originally allowed employers not to hire or to promote their employees over the age of 70 because of their age alone, and deletes the provision that allowed institution of higher education to require that their tenured employees retire at 70 years old. So there are several other laws out there that are starting to address these things. Additionally, we've mentioned this a little bit, so kind of fitting in one of the other buckets there are national and international campaigns to and ageism. We're going to go over a couple of them in more detail. We've already talked a bit about the World Health Organization global campaign to combat ageism. And another one is the Reframing Aging initiative, which Nancy is also very involved with. And this is just an example of some of the types of materials, and we're going to watch a little video from them in a minute as well, on the different types of things that they put out, including this one called Our Words Matter. So just showing some different examples, instead of using words, as you can see here in the middle of the slide, such as seniors or elderly, aging dependents, and things that are more terms that are very othering, focusing on more neutral terms and more inclusive terms. So using words like older people or older Americans, or talking about we and us, even as we're discussing aging. And then also even things you can see, words like struggle, battle, fight, when we're referring to someone who is older, and using something, they give an example of a building momentum metaphor. Aging is a dynamic process that leads to new abilities and knowledge we can share with our communities. It's taking a bit of more positive than some of those negative connotations that words we use have. There's also a Reframing the Narrative initiative. So this is actually called From Changing the Narrative in Colorado. And this was a campaign to redesign birthday cards. So we saw some of the birthday cards that were very negative, that showed a lot of the stereotypes around aging. And these are a few that show that as we get older, it can be a very positive and vibrant thing. So with pictures of flowers and having things that's, for instance, this one in the middle that says of life brings wisdom, happy birthday, wise one. So focusing on those types of things instead of the negative cards we're used to. We have been featuring some of these pictures as well throughout our PowerPoint, but we also have AARP with Getty Images also had a campaign to really improve the pictures that we're seeing in the media and that we're using to really show the positive side of aging, so that people can be older and out there riding motorcycles and surfing, and the importance of intergenerational relationships, and that people can still be involved that way as well. And then here's just another example of a couple of campaigns as well for advertising. So on the left of each of these examples here, you see a very ageist commercial. So a person who is seen as very cartoonish or fuddy-duddy, here sitting on top of this bun, where there's a much more respectful example of someone who's engaging with a younger person who's either teaching or playing chess with him and interacting more positively that way as well. And then another example we often see are of older people who are maybe not able to do things, who are in pain, much more negative, where this person bending over, clearly their back hurts because they're older and they're bending over. So it's meant to be funny, but in reality, it's mean, stereotypical, and ageist. So then we provide another example of a more positive commercial, which shows the respectful side of things. And this was actually a commercial back in 1987, when McDonald's had created a program to hire older workers in their restaurants. So a couple of examples too of some things that we're doing here at WashU. One of them is a course called When I'm 64, Transforming Your Future. And this is an example not only of something we're doing to address ageism, but also to encompass the intergenerational aspect, which can be really important when combating ageism as well. So in this course, it's a course for freshmen at WashU, and it teaches the different aspects of aging from a multi-disciplinary perspective. And not only are the younger students taking this class and learning about aging, but they're also taking the class alongside older adults. We have usually anywhere from 10 to 20 older adult students who take the course as well, and are able to really provide some real life perspectives about their process of aging, and also learn from the younger students as well. And so now I'm going to just show another video here from Reframing Aging that kind of sums up a little bit of everything that we've been discussing today.
Today, many of us are living longer, healthier lives. We're recognizing that aging is a natural part of living, and that later life is an important time for work, play, connection, and contribution. Many older people say they are happier now than ever before. So why is this still happening? We need digital natives, fresh faces. Aches and pains are normal at your age. Say no to aging. In so many ways, our incomplete understanding of aging perpetuates negative stereotypes of older people. It's so common that 8 out of 10 people age 50 and older say they've experienced ageism in their daily lives. But when we exclude older people, we all lose. It hurts the economy by limiting the participation of older workers. Ageism increases avoidable health care costs, harms mental and physical health, and increases disability. And it robs us of our sense of purpose and connection. In a just society, everyone can participate and contribute throughout their life. Everyone is appreciated for who they are. To fight back against the injustice of ageism, we need to tell the whole story about aging. Reframing aging is a long-term social change endeavor designed to improve the public's understanding of aging and the many ways that older people contribute to our society. Reframing aging says that words matter, and changing the way we talk can change attitudes about aging. Powered by research and proven strategies, Reframing Aging can help us change the culture and drive support for policies that help us live well at every stage of life. Start telling a more powerful story, not about them, but about all of us. Find resources and get started at reframingaging.org.
All right, I'd just like to wrap up with a few other resources that we have here at WashU. We have an ageism infographic that also summarizes a bit of what we've been saying today and a neat little snapshot that we definitely encourage you to take a look at, use, share with others as might be helpful. And as Nancy mentioned, we are also working on an understanding and confronting ageism background paper. This is not available on our website quite yet, but should hopefully be available by the end of the month. You can access that through the link on our website here, and Emily is also putting it in the chat for us, as well as a variety of other resources that we have on our website that we'd encourage you to check out. Additionally, we are wanting to continue these conversations. We're hoping today is just the start of discussing ageism and why aging matters. And so we are hoping to be hosting a brown bag discussion on age matters. So if that's something that you would be interested in, you can scan the QR code or email us or go to our website for more information on that. But we have a form that we would like you to fill out just so we can gauge your interest, put you on our list, and follow up with you at a later date on that. So as we're wrapping up, I'd just like to leave you with these final thoughts here. That ageism is discriminating against your future and your past self, and that it is most certainly something we need to eliminate for all of us. So thank you again for being here. And now Nancy and I would like to open it up for further feedback, questions, discussion. Again, please put your questions in the Q&A, which can be found at the bottom of your screen, and we will be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, please put some questions in. We'd love to have some conversation with you. While you're doing that, if anyone has a question, I wanted to, I'm privileged to be part of the Reframing Aging initiative that we shared some information. It's a great site for you to get some good infographics and all kinds of information. But one of the things that it's been criticized for, and we have to be very careful about, is saying that we're only talking about the positive part of aging, denying the fact that we all experience frailty, that we do experience chronic conditions, and that the death rate is still 100%. kind of idea, the criticism that we can't act like this is all so rosy. So the dialogue has been changing, and I hope you picked it up. It's to tell the whole story, the complete story about aging. That does include people at all levels of health, all levels of engagement, because we tend to focus on just the more negative side with all of our stereotypes. So it's telling a full story of aging. We want to also avoid just exceptionalist story. You know, the older person participating in a marathon. Yeah, it happens, but it's not the norm. So it's the whole story of aging, the whole continuum. And there's a great article out from geriatrics, from the American Geriatric Society, I believe, that says, don't cut out frailty of the Reframing Aging Initiative. We have to know how to talk and include this in how we think about aging in a more realistic way. So I just want to, it's telling the whole story. That's the important part of reframing aging. Okay, what do we got down here?
Yeah, we have a few questions coming in now. So first, could undue worries that are supposedly acts of kindness being viewed as compassionate ageism end up discouraging our society from offering help to or being patient with older adults where special consideration is actually appropriate?
So that was a lot. That's an important question. I think we're talking about compassionate ageism and how it can hurt, but also how it can benefit people. I think that the intersection between ableism and ageism is big. People that can't hear are more likely to be older, but not necessarily. So we see it so much in driving that some of you all research that, you know, older drivers, as if it's a monolithic group, have problems. Well, it's drivers that have sensory impairment or cognitive impairment, right? So it's more specificity in who you're talking about and who we need to make sure has safety net programs and protective programs. It is very hard to figure out, but it's the idea that we can't homogenize and segment everyone into a certain group and then treat everyone that way. So Nellie, what else was in that question? I'm not reading it.
I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay.
Yep. And if not, Alice, please let us know and we can discuss further. So our next question, could you comment on what we know about the relationship between ageism and intergenerational conflict?
Natalie, feel free to jump in here too. You know this stuff as well as I do. I think that we know that I use the zero-sum game perspective, that it exists in a lot of our budgeting. If somebody gets it, somebody else doesn't. And so intergenerational conflict comes up when you think about, well, if an old person keeps that job, there isn't one for me. So it is part of the zero-sum game perspective. And in budgeting, that is hard to talk about who gets the piece of the pie rather than how to grow the whole pie so everybody gets what they need. But in employment is a easier example of how there's some wrong thinking in the zero-sum argument, because there's no evidence that one-on-one older people take jobs from younger people. Historically, the evidence is that if more older people are working, more younger people are working, and vice versa, that it's all growing together and that there's not this one-on-one substitutions of jobs. That might be in a small firm, it might be at an educational institution, but in general in our economy, old people don't take jobs from young people. And people compare this to thinking about women entering the workforce. It was like, oh, if women have jobs, men won't have jobs. Well, that didn't happen. So I think it's the zero-sum game perspective that can create the intergenerational conflict. Thanks for that question, Peter.
Yeah, and I would just add on that, and it obviously very much goes both ways too. So not only younger people being more ageist towards older people, but older people sometimes being more ageist towards younger people and having those intergenerational conflicts as well. some similar examples to what Nancy provided with work, an older worker worrying about a younger worker coming in and kind of edging them out of the workplace. So again, kind of having the zero-sum game there as well. But then also, sometimes, some of the comments that we saw earlier about, younger generations being more lazy or not having a work ethic or those sorts of things as well. So we definitely need to just be cognizant of both of those things. When actually we found that, having generations mixed, having younger and older workers together or younger and older people learning together are actually beneficial to everybody of every age because of the different perspectives, experiences, and all of those sorts of things that they provide to one another. All right, so our next question, how are universities typically seen on the scale of pro-aging? Are they representative of the current culture, more advanced or less advanced, would we say?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Jim, for that question. That's why there's been a lot of attention on universities lately. There's a national movement, a global movement actually called Age-Friendly University. We call it Age Inclusive University in the committee that I'm on with the Gerontological Society of America. Higher education is being singled out because it tends to stay more age segregated than the workforce, right? The workforce is more age segregated because people need to work and we need workers. But institutions of higher education are so firmly age segregated in how we think about education that it is harder to think about profound transformations. And as you know, older students that come back, and here at WashU, older students are in their 30s, right? 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70 and beyond. Have a different experience, often related to, discomfort on campus or lack of inclusion. So we're certainly, I think it is as an organization because of its historical roots and our visions about, we have had such prescribed pathways of how we think what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go to school, do this, do that, do that. And as we're living such longer lives, these pathways have to become more circular and more on, as we say, on ramps and off ramps. So universities have a long way to go, but I think it's starting in a very interesting way that I could sure give you some resources about. Nellie, what else are you seeing? I love Lisa's comment.
Good question. Yeah, me too. So Lisa says, schools celebrate 100 days by encouraging dressing up as a 100-year-old. How can we reframe it to celebrate aging rather than mock it?
Huh.
I can also, something that just came to mind. I mean, I think, Nancy alluded to this a little bit, but we now know that kids who are being born and most likely celebrating these holidays have a very high chance of living to the age of 100. So maybe instead of dressing up as a 100-year-old, thinking more about what would their life look like when they're 100, kind of taking that spin of, we're not just, and talking about positive aging and things like that too. So instead of, our minds that go to, of course we all think, and again, a lot of what we see, the little kids with the walker, pretending to be 100-year-old is, funny or whatever. But at the same time, just because you're 100 doesn't mean you're going to have a walker or you're going to, need a cane and those sorts of things. So talking about how can we maybe even change some of those costumes to be, if we are doing that, more realistic to what it's actually going to be like when those kids are 100 years old.
Yeah, maybe Lisa also is just pointing out how that can lead to such age stereotype and then feed other directed ageism and self-directed ageism, just trying to get people to not do that and think of another way to celebrate 100 days.
All right, and Imelda had a great comment too. So when we address the positive attitude of aging, we think that it's important that positive data is backed up by data. In this sense, positive is not just another word for Pollyanna-ish, but it is the truth about aging.
Right. I think it's that whole story notion, the extreme continuum of health and engagement, et cetera, that exists in later life. We have to include all of that in our images. Thanks for that comment.
Yep. And our next question, how will ageism be affected by an increase in technological and scientific advancements in our society?
What did people, I wish we could talk as a group because I'm sure some of you have better answers than Natalie and I. Of course, technology is so important in so many aspects of our long lives. In innovations and smart technology and how helpful it can be on one hand and things we have to be aware of. Scientific advancements help us live, help us live healthier lives while we're living longer lives. How is it going to affect ageism is a good question. I'm not sure. I think we all think about the digital divide and know that it exists. What I've learned is that there's a great variety in later life of people who are digitally competent and not. And that divide exists at every age. We saw that with younger people that face the digital divide because of resources. But I've also learned that people can't act like this is a static thing and they're not going to experience it because already people in their 30s and 40s are being less digitally competent than people younger than them. It's such a fast moving target that we have to understand that it's about access and training and motivation. It's not about age. Can you add anything, Natalie?
No, that was actually pretty much what I was going to discuss. I mean, and I think it'll be curious, or it'll be interesting to see how it maybe does change, especially when you talk about the digital divide. As more people are becoming more comfortable, I think the digital divide will be growing smaller as people are more familiar with technology and our technology advances to be more user-friendly, easier for people of all ages to learn and use and those sorts of things as well. So maybe even though it's, I think, sometimes pretty prevalent with it comes to some of those things today, hopefully that'll be lessening and, we'll be doing other things to lessen ageism in general as well. So I think it looks like we have another comment here from Emily. I've been thinking about ableism and how that harms people of all ages as well. It seems interrelated with ageism, but distinct. It is not only older adults who have mobility, sensory, or cognitive impairments, and not all older adults will experience.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's what I've been figuring out more and more. So much of an ableism and ageism are so related. And we tend to think older adults equals people experiencing decline, whether it's cognitive decline or mobility decline. Yeah. Thanks for that comment, Emily.
All right. And another comment as well, ageism, particularly compassionate ageism, is particularly obvious when the older adult has dementia.
Right, right. Yes. And we understand that protective stance, that needing to make decisions on behalf of people. We understand it, but the position is always how to maximize as much as possible someone's decision-making capacity, et cetera. We have great experts in the audience on how to do that well. But I love Madeline's question. It might be our last one. How can you personally prevent internalizing aging? We hear these messages, and I think COVID has really exacerbated that. We've heard these messages and have felt very vulnerable to the virus, so also very vulnerable to isolation and depression and all the things that go along. So how can we prevent it? I think we talk about it with others that are our same age, and we do things to reinforce each other's control and power and strength. And I always go back to an old theory in aging that talks about selecting, optimizing, and compensating. We select what we want to do, it's important. We compensate so we can do it, and we optimize our ability to do it so that we can keep doing it. So it's finding ways to maximize what we can do to make sure that we're not just buying these messages about what our old self should be like. But thanks for that question, Madeline. Maybe we can think of something that the village can do to help people combat internalizing ageism.